Hey, everybody. Good morning. I see somebody already joined. That's great. We'll just hang a little bit to happen to go on for today. But today I had kind of a special treat for the discussion, and I thought we would talk about the top 10 guitarists. Hey, TBA, good morning to you. We're just going to hang a little bit to let people come on. I'll tell you what's going to happen today. Today we are going to do the top rock guitarists, and we'll discuss that a bit. First of all, can it be done? Can it be done? And then what are the criteria that we would use to do that objectively? And then sort of my answers to that. So we'll be talking about that in just a second. First of all, I've had problems with the sound in the past. So just to check with everybody, how's the sound going? Sound okay? Everybody hear me? Good. Excellent. Thanks, TBA. Thanks, Brian. How you doing? Hey, Matt. How you doing? Good to see everybody here. All right. Well, we'll wait maybe a little bit, and then we'll talk about the criteria, and then we'll get going. We already had one drop off. Okay, we got another one back on. Cool. So first of all, let's talk about the criteria that I use. So for those of you who don't know me, and I've got the glasses to prove it and the spreadsheets as well. I'm a statistician. I'm a mathematician. That's what I do in real life. I just play guitar in my fake life here. It's not fake life. It's real for sure. But for my real work life, I'm a mathematician and engineer. And so I like to think about things this way. Why do I think so-and-so is great, or a type of music is great, or what have you? So I like to think about it that way. So let's talk about the criteria. I have three main criteria that I used in evaluating this. So the project was simply this: who are the greatest rock players of all time? Or at least at the end, maybe I'll even say at least for me, because there's some subjectivity in here for sure, okay? So anyway, so here are the criteria that I chose. First of all, bigness. What does that mean? Well, what that means is that it has to be big with respect to non-guitarists. Hey, Mike, don't give me a heart attack, brother. All right. So it has to be big to non-guitarists. It has to be big to guitarists, and then it has to be influential. So what do I mean by that? Let me give you an example. So somebody who would be big to guitarists, but maybe not big to non-guitarists, would be Yngwie Malmsteen. So if I got on some guitar group and I said, oh, Yngwie Malmsteen's great, probably nobody's going to say, who the heck is Yngwie Malmsteen? Or, even somebody like Paul Kossoff, right? So, or David Gilmour. Nobody's going to say, who's that? On the other hand, if I asked a random person on the street something about Yngwie Malmsteen, they might say, what? What are you talking about? Okay, compare that to somebody like Eddie Van Halen, right? If I asked, or Neil Schon, yeah, exactly. Neil Schoen's a good example of that. If I asked, say, a relative what they thought of Eddie Van Halen, they'd probably have an opinion. Oh, great guitar player, or I hated his music, or something, because they were pretty big. Yeah, even Tom Scholz. So even Eddie Van Halen was known to guitarists, known to non-guitarists, and then also Eddie Van Halen was very influential of guitarists going forward. So if you think about guitar before Eddie Van Halen and after, Eddie Van Halen didn't invent tapping, but certainly a lot of people did tap after that. All right, so that's bigness. The second category is their play. How well did they play? Right? So the way I think about that is three aspects to it. Number one, how original was it? Number two, how much feeling did they put into it? I realize that's very subjective. And number three, what unique sound did they have? So let's talk about that for a second, okay? So for originality, you know, somebody who might be real original would be Mark Knopfler, right? He played differently than anybody in the 1980s. All these big hair bands were doing, you know, Eddie Van Halen clones and things like that, and Randy Rhoads clones. But Mark Knopfler was doing something totally different, right? So that would be, he's a very original player, at least in my view. Number two, you know, feeling, you can think of maybe the difference between David Gilmour and Alex Lifeson, right? Alex Lifeson certainly had the chops, some of the chops anyway. But if you think about somebody who puts a lot of feeling, David Gilmour might be somebody who comes to mind. All right. And the third thing is, do they have a unique sound to them, right? So maybe somebody like Mike Campbell of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, while he might not have had a lot of technique, and he might not be a household name, he certainly had a very unique sound to him, right? Keith Richards is another guy who has a unique sound. There's plenty of guys who have unique sound. All right. Phil X, yeah. So Phil X would be an example of somebody who has a unique style of play, a lot of chops, but non-guitarist, no clue who he is, right? So very low on the bigness factor. All right. Excellent. So the last part, the last one was technique. So technique, you know, the way that I think about it is technique in their time. So technique. So let's just keep this simple. How good were they on the rhythm side? How good are they on the lead? Right? Just simple as that. So there are players that have both. There are players that have one but not the other. You know, Keith Richards might be a tremendously good rhythm player, no doubt one of the best, right? But in terms of a lead player, you know, how great was he? You know, Richie Blackmore, I think, was actually good at both, but he's certainly well known for his leads. All right. So anyway, so we can all have, hey, David, how you doing? Good to see everybody. All right. All right. So, and there's lots of different players. Now, my knowledge and influence in terms to me pretty much ends at around 1985, 1986, with a few exceptions. I mean, I'm a huge John Mayer fan. I think he's one of the better players, and other players like that. Okay, and I certainly have my preferences. So I did this on a spreadsheet, and here's what I got. Not really, though. I kind of did it on a spreadsheet, okay? So again, remember the three criteria that I'm using are bigness, play, and technique. Would love to hear other things that you talk about as well. Do you value technique more than others? More than style of play and originality, or how big they were, how influential they were? That might change your results quite a bit, right? If you value chops and technique, guys like what's the Jack Lee, Jason Becker, Steve Vai, those guys are going to come up a little bit higher. If you value popularity outside of or how big they were, popularity outside of guitar players, you know, different guys are. Angus Young's going to come up there, and Keith Richards and people like that. Ron Wood, maybe. All right. Rick Derringer. All right. So we'll talk about, here's my top 10, and then I'll tell you who was on the list, okay? So here's my top 10, okay, everybody? Number 10, whoa! Number 10, Steve Howe. Maybe you guys don't, maybe some of you younger folks don't remember Steve Howe, but Steve Howe is a player with Yes, guitarist from Yes. Incredible chops. Incredible timing. Nobody played like Steve Howe in terms of his timing. And that guy he knew his knowledge of the fretboard was just immense, you know, influences from country and all that. Now, I think where Steve Howe kind of fails a little bit is on the bigness factor. People outside of Yes fans or progressive rock fans aren't going to know Steve Howe or guitarists. But Steve Howe won best overall guitarist for 5 years for guitar player. For those of you who don't remember that, that was in the 70s and maybe even early 80s. All right, number 10, Steve Howe. Here's my number 9. Oh, by the way, I should say these are not in any particular order, although you can imagine that the ones near the top are closer to my faves. All right, here's my number 9. My number 9 is Duane Allman. Now, I know you can say maybe he's more blues than rock, but oh man, it's hard to argue with. He reinvented slide, made everybody else a better musician, and there's so many of the things he does that just kind of almost bring tears to my eyes. So you can tell I'm kind of welling up even as I'm saying it right now. Oh yeah, Joe Walsh, Rick Terrence, lots of great players that were in there. Tommy Bolin, I see mentioned. All right, so that's my number 9. All right, Skydog, yeah, you got it. Okay, here's my number 8, and this is somebody who, when I was younger, was probably not all that influential to me, but when I got older, I came to like him a lot more, and that's Jeff Beck. So not a hard decision to put in a top 10 list, in my opinion. His articulation is unbelievable. People know him outside of guitar, although he's mostly guitar fans. Yeah, I mean, from the stuff that he did in the mid 70s, I don't know. He's still rocking it. Do you know anybody who's in their 70s who can still wear a mullet like Jeff Beck and a choker like Jeff Beck? I don't know. He's still killing it. So Jeff Beck is number 8. Here we go. Here's number 7. Many of you are probably going to not agree with this one, but he's one of my really top players, and that's Peter Frampton. Well, Peter Frampton, now I think in later years, if I listen to him now, he doesn't sound as he doesn't get me like he did when he played when he was younger. But I think, turning back the clock, my brother gave me, or he was a huge Peter Frampton fan, and I won Peter Frampton Comes Alive in a raffle in school. And I was really a Beatles fan and a Elton John fan and a Who fan and a Led Zeppelin fan, and I had never really paid much attention to Frampton. And I got this, and I was just blown away. And as a guitarist who just knew the pentatonic scale, I didn't know what he was doing. He's a moto player, so that's why he stands out as being kind of different. If you listen to his solos, they're very, very melodic and still have a rock edge. I'm a huge Peter Frampton player. And musically, also, he used slightly different chord progressions that forced him to go out of key. So if you just tried to play in a single key, it didn't do it. You had to move around a little bit. Lovely player. I love his lines. Lines on My Face from the Frampton Comes Alive is got to be one of my top 10 all-time solos. It's just so beautiful and technically good. Hard to argue with that. And of course, do you feel like we do? All right, number 6. A guy who, in my opinion, doesn't get a lot of love these days, Carlos Santana. The thing I love about Santana, he plays one note and you know who he is. I mean, I guess today it could be a Santana clone like Orianthe or something like that. I know she's not quite a clone, I get it, but he had a signature sound and a way to play. And if you see some of the old footage, just puts everything into everything. So huge influence to me. And just love his play. His phrasing is phenomenally good. He has all those trail offs that nobody else does. And he also can play in lots of different styles. If you've heard him play jazz, one thing that you got to know about Carlos Santana, listening to him play over lots of things, is that when he plays a note, I guarantee you he knows inside his head what it's going to sound like before he plays it. I mean, he just seemed to pick every note perfectly. All right, that's my number 6. All right, getting to the top ones now. Okay, well, Soul Sacrifice. Oh, yeah. I mean, check out Soul Sacrifice on at Woodstock for like I don't know, watch it, and then you got to have a beer afterward, or whatever is your hallucinogen of choice, or whatever, just to relax a little bit, or put your feet up or whatever. All right, number 5, Jimmy Page. what are you going to say? Jimmy Page, incredible body of work. When I was younger, certainly huge influence. If you didn't know every Led Zeppelin lick from Heartbreaker to Stairway to Heaven and everything, Live and Love and Made, every Immigrant Song, everything in between, you were not a player. I mean, you just had to know every Led Zeppelin lick when you were in a garage band. Whole Lot of Love, everything. And the perfect sloppiness that he had in 69, 70, 71, 72, he could play sloppy, but still had control over it. Very few people can do that. And if you try and recreate a lot of that stuff, I think that's part of the problem. And so much of the sound that he got and what he did was in his fingers. And he, obviously, Led Zeppelin created a lot of things. Their later stuff, while maybe his play was not as good, his composition got better or more complicated anyway. Not always the best thing to be more complicated. All right. Number 4, guy who gets real big or high on the bigness scale, high on the originality, at least in the early years, and high on the influence is Eddie Van Halen. I don't know why people don't, on Guitar Player magazine's top players of all time, he was like number 60, like something like that. The first one that they did, he was something like number 60. And, you know, Bruce Springsteen, you know, was like in the top 20. Now, I'm a huge Bruce Springsteen fan, don't get me wrong. But I think if you even ask Bruce, like, who played better, he'd laugh at you. He'd say, of course, Eddie Van Halen. Give me a break. I mean, when he came out, people talk about Hendrix. When Hendrix came out, that they'd never heard anything like it. It just blew their minds. I wasn't around then, so I don't know. But when Eddie Van Halen came out and somebody played it for me, I was like, that was definitely a WTF moment for me. When they played, the first one I heard was You Really Got Me and then Eruption. They just played those basically. And You Really Got Me was the one that really got me. I just couldn't believe how it just sounded totally weird. That lick at the end when he's playing this weird stuff. I'd never heard anybody do that before. And it was just so clean and fast and exploding. Incredible. And then Eruption, I don't know, when you're in 8th grade, Eruption's great. I think the older I've gotten, I've liked it less, but everything on that album is just incredible. And you know, they obviously got huge too. All right, that's my number 4. My number 3 is Clapton. I know everybody disses Clapton. It's sort of like a fun thing to do on top 10 list is to say Clapton sucks, or Page sucks too is another one of those. Those guys were great. I mean, to me, there's no Eddie Van Halen without Eric Clapton. If you listen to the classic stuff, he was one of the main guys who transitioned to rock, right? Transitioned blues to rock and made it all popular. And even if you just consider the stuff that he did with the Beatles, he's on my top 10 list. I mean, that stuff will live forever. You know, his solos on While My Guitar Gently Weeps and Let It Be and all that stuff just added to it. So, and yeah, all the stuff. I mean, there's just so much stuff when you get into it. He's just one of the greatest. So, you know, those guys who say Clapton sucks, I don't know. He just created a lot of great music to me. Very influential. Okay. Here's probably the guy that most people are going to disagree with on the list. But I think he's one of the all-time bests, maybe the best. And it's George Harrison. Sure. Does he have the technique of Jake Lee? No. Come on. Or Eddie Van Halen or Page? No, he doesn't. He had good technique for his time. He had very good technique. His riffs were original, and nobody can come up with an original melody on a guitar like George Harrison. Nobody could. Yeah, he was awesome. And you know, probably more influential as a guitarist than anybody else on my list. You know, got more people to play guitar, and more people listened to him. He was not closed-minded. He brought in Clapton to play when he knew that Clapton would add. That's an interesting thing. But, his solos on things like Something, that's a beautiful solo. If you don't, let's go back and listen to that if you haven't for a while. Just the way that he played was just incredible. And no less a guitarist than Robin Ford said that of all the people who surprised me about how good they were, George Harrison surprised him the most. So, yeah, George Harrison, my number 2. My number 1 shouldn't surprise anybody. It's Jimi. Everything there, to me, the technique on, the technique on for his time was for both rhythm, his rhythm technique. I mean, he invented that whole sort of funky way of playing rhythm and blues, that the Motown people, Steve Cropper was kind of getting there, but boy, Hendrix just kind of exploded it. And, just created lots of works of art. And his lead stuff was great for its time. I think it's still great. Great note choices, very original style for its time. I mean, there's so many clones now, so it's really hard. You listen to John Mayer, and boy, does he sound. He's a good Hendrix sort of style player. And of course, Stevie Ray could do it as well. I didn't list Stevie Ray, but there's lots and lots. All right, so anyway, so that's my list. I want to read to you. So who are some folks that you would put on your list that I didn't put in? I'd like to see your comments now. And also, I'm going to read off some of the people that were on the list that I'll call them, they made number 11 that I considered. So very nearly making it into the list was Brian May. Let's see. Angus Young was very close to making it. Who can argue with the riffs that he did? And great leads, too. Yeah. Let's see. Mark Knopfler. All right, now I'll just kind of name them off. Keith Richards, David Gilmour, Slash. People diss Slash. Slash is a great player. Listen to what he plays. He's very emotive and he's got good technique. Again, is he like awesome technique? No, but listen to it. You can remember his solos after he plays them. To me, that's a huge thing. Joe Walsh, Brian Setzer, Chuck Berry. People don't give Chuck Berry enough love. I mean, super influence, and he's no slouch. No slouch on that. Scotty Moore, Neil Schon, Steve Cropper, Gary Moore, Alvin Lee. He's one of my idols, but he never really kind of, he's known in country circles, but yeah. Pete Townshend, of course, Roger Fisher of Heart, Elliot Easton, Richie Blackmore, Ted Nugent. He's a little out there for sure, but as a guitar player, listen to Journey to the Center of Your Mind or those early stuff. Hey, I grew up in Detroit. Everybody, he was, I would say, besides playing Led Zeppelin licks, you had to know Ted Nugent licks. You had to know Somebody Get Me a Doctor, but just what the doctor ordered, and of course Stranglehold and a bunch of those other things. Wango Tango. The Edge, people diss the guy, but he's good. He's good. Johnny Marr, Steve Lukather, Scotty Anderson, Paul Kossoff, Billy Gibbons, Gary Rossington, Steve Gaines. I didn't list the third one, Alan Collins, but Alan Collins, Robbie Krieger, John Fogerty, Mick Taylor. I think of Mick as more of a blues player, but obviously he was a crossover. I put Steve Vai on there to consider. Prince, Randy Rhoads, Stevie Ray. Again, more of a blues player, so that's kind of why he didn't really make my top 10. Larry Carlton. I put Larry Carlton down, but he was really he goes out from the Bigness factor. Joe Perry, Satriani, Jan Ackerman. Oh man, yeah, somebody's saying Jan Ackerman. He's a great player. In the U.S., he's pretty much unknown. But Hocus Pocus by Focus. Listen to that and think, and then decide whether you think he's a great player. Let me take a look at, Michael Schenker. You know what? I didn't even put Michael Schenker on the list. He's an incredible player. He probably wouldn't have made my top 10, but he could make many people's top 10. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, for sure. Glenn Campbell made it on the list. Let me keep looking down. Gosh, I can't believe I didn't put Michael Schenker on there. And Jeff Healey, I didn't put on because I think of his more as a blues player. Same with Eric Johnson. I didn't put him on, but he may as well go on, with Steve Vai. Let's see. Frank Zappa I put on. Steve Morse I put on. Again, he might score high in the technique. When I was younger, Steve Morse would have been my top player. Now he's come down quite a bit. And it's not because other people have technique or I don't think he's got great technique. I just think he plays a lot of safe notes. Look, far be it from me to criticize somebody, and here I go criticizing somebody, but he's way better guitar player than I will ever be. But anybody whose philosophy kind of revolves around playing safe notes, it's rock and roll. I just don't think it quite cuts it. But fantastic player, obviously. Steve Hackett, Robert Fripp. I put Paul Gilbert in there. Again, great player, but to me, he's a guitar player. He's a guitar player. Robin Trower, Tony Iommi, Mike Campbell, Jerry Doucette. For those of you who don't know Jerry Doucette, Google him. You'll find a treasure trove of just great guitar playing. Elliot Randall. Again, kind of a studio guy, though. Glenn Campbell, Alex Lifeson, Rick Emmett, Tommy Bolin, Dick Wagner of Alice Cooper, Tom Scholz, Ace Frehley, Andy Summers, Adrian Belew, Curtis Mayfield, Rory Gallagher, Leo Nocantelli. Wonder how many of you guys know him. Richard Thompson, Alan Holsworth, Alvin Lee. I didn't put Alvin Lee on there. I could have, but he feels more like a blues player to me than rock. But 10 years after, I'd love to change the world. I should have put him on. I put Danny Gatton and Roy Buchanan on here, but I really don't think that they're more, again, to me, they're more stylists, but maybe Danny Gatton deserves to be there. I don't know. Let's see. Dickie Betts, Phil Keggy, Christian rock player. For those of you who don't know Phil Keggy, Google him and kind of ignore his acoustic, go to his rock stuff. And if you can find his older stuff, you'll be amazed. Ry Cooter, Derek Trucks, Lindsey Buckingham. I put Sonny Landreth on there. I put Yngwie, I put John Mayer, and I put Jeff Baxter. And that's where I am. I didn't put Stephen Stills. Who said Stephen Stills? Scooter C. Good one. I love Stephen Stills. I heard Crosby, Stills, Nash live once. Stephen Stills did an acoustic solo that went on for like 12 minutes. Blew my mind. I had no idea he was that good. Just kept everybody there. Kim Thale. Yeah, for me, I didn't put, you know what? I didn't put him on. He deserves to be on the list for sure. When I was kind of thinking about it, he wouldn't make anywhere near my top 10 just because I don't know his work that well. Yeah. I like to stop and see. Randy Rhoads was on the list for sure. Randy Rhoads was on it. Vinnie Vincent. I don't know who that is. Francis Rossi, Rick Parfitt from Robert Parfitt. Now, I haven't heard of those guys. What band do they play in? Neil Young. Okay, so Mike M. Neil Young. Yeah. Neil Young is one of my. Hold on, somebody is saying Steve Howe. Somebody is saying Steve Howe. For the fellow who said Steve Howe made my top 10. He was number 10. Steve Howe, love him. Neil Young gets dissed all the time. People can't believe that. Oh, how is Neil Young a great guitar player? Do yourself a favor. I know everybody says Cinnamon Girl. I can do you one better. If you don't know Neil Young's playing, go to Cortez the Killer, Google it, listen to it. He doesn't have technique. I wish he would have had just a little bit of technique. Maybe it would have made him better. Maybe not. Maybe it would have made him worse. But if that solo doesn't grab you, there's some wrong notes in it or some notes that sound a little sour. But if you don't think it just kind of melts you into it just feels like I melt into, sun-drenched Mexico into the ground when I listen to that. So that's music, man. That's good. The Kiss guy after Ace. I don't know him. Jerry Garcia. Yeah. Dave Mason. Steve Winwood, I don't know his guitar playing at all. Yeah. Uh-huh. All right. Status Quo. Okay, I'll check it out. Robert Parfit, I will check it out. All the Kiss guys. Yeah, I don't know. They're fun. Kiss is kind of fun. Todd Rundgren. I don't know. I don't know about Todd's guitar playing. Randy Rhoads for sure. Randy Rhoads was pretty high. I can tell you who kind of made my number 11. How about that? I'll tell you the guys who kind of made my number 11. And again, I'm not claiming that it's all perfect here, but here are the guys that kind of made it near the top. Brian May, Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, Peter Frampton, George Harrison, Hendrix. Many of these guys did crack the 10. Hendrix, Van Halen, Jeff Beck, Steve Howe, Angus Young, Carlos Santana, Duane Allman, Mark Knopfler, Keith Richards, David Gilmour, Slash, Joe Walsh. Joe Walsh rates really high on my list. Brian Setzer also ranks really high on my list. Chuck Berry, Scotty Moore, Neil Schon. I got to tell you, there's a bunch of players who are, there's a couple of people who have said Neil Schon, and I love Neil Schon. I loved Neil Schon. I don't know if I'd do anymore. I saw him live. I was teaching a class in Connecticut, and one of the people in the class was an old, like an 80s chick. And she said, "Oh, Mark, we got to go to see Def Leppard and Journey." And I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if I want to live my my high school days. And Leslie West, yes, J. Alfred Brown, thank you for putting that in there. He deserves to be way up there. Leslie West, great player. I'm embarrassed for not putting him on the list. He definitely deserves to be on there. Mountain, great player and great emotive player. Anyway, getting back to Neil Schon. So I went to see, I was never a Def Leppard fan when I was younger, but I loved Journey primarily because of Neil Schon. And I saw Def Leppard, and I'll be damned if I wasn't like into their stuff. I mean, they really put on a good show. They're old now, but they still had it. And then Journey got up there, and I realized Steve Perry wasn't there, but the guy who did Steve Perry, the new Steve Perry, I don't know his name. He was good, but everybody else, it was terrible. Jonathan Cain wearing leopard print and that toupee just didn't work. And then, oh my God, Neil Schon, has he lost something in his noodle or whatever? Different guitar for every song, sounded like crap. His